Hi, my name is Giorgio Gilestro and I'm a lecturer at the Department of Life Sciences at Imperial College London. My lab studies sleep. In particular, we try to understand why we sleep, what is sleep, what sleep is for. This might sound like a trivial question, somehow a silly question, but it's not. It's actually one of the most fundamental and important questions of biology. And particularly, this is a unsolved mystery of biology. Nobody knows what sleep is and why we do it. This is particularly puzzling if you think that it's not just humans that do sleep, but in fact any animal that has been tested so far. Jellyfish, giraffes, elephants, domestic pets, fruit flies sleep. And all these animals need sleep, although in different amount and different ways. And all these animals suffer when sleep is removed, when we perform so-called sleep deprivation. We humans are very familiar with the effect of sleep deprivation ourselves, and they are not absolutely dissimilar from the effect of sleep deprivation that we see, for instance, in fruit flies. I mentioned fruit flies because that's what my lab studies actually. We study fruit flies. Fruit flies are, as you might know, the second most common use animal model in research, and they're extremely successful. So far, 6 Nobel Prizes have been awarded to research done in fruit flies. The last one was, in fact, this year, in 2018, for the discovery of circadian rhythms. So it's an extremely successful animal model because it allows us to study behavior, but at the same time, genetics, cell biology, all those aspects that made modern biomedical science as successful as it is. In our lab in particular, we study the function of sleep on fruit flies, meaning that we try to understand why flies need sleep, what keeps them awake, what makes them tired after sleep deprivation, and what are the consequences of sleep deprivation on those animals. We know that sleep in flies is very conserved. For instance, if we give them coffee, they stay awake. If we give them hypnotic drugs, they'll fall asleep. So this conservation at the molecular level tell us that the basic fundamental properties of sleep in flies are the same basic fundamental property that we find in humans. And that's not surprising because pretty much everything we've been studying in flies so far, from embryonic development to model of disease, are shown to be really conserved all the way to humans. Now, why this might be interesting for you? One reason sleep could be interesting for you is that the consequences of sleep deprivation are not, as many colleagues of mine think, are not just limited to lack of performance when it comes to behavior and cognitive performance. In other words, many people think that sleep is just for the brain. And in fact, we have no evidence to make this claim. There is no way to know whether sleep is actually just for the brain or for the whole body. The experiment that one will have to do to test this hypothesis will have to have the brain fall asleep but the body stay awake, or conversely to have the body fall asleep and the brain stay awake. And we cannot just do that experiment. Not in humans for sure, not in rodents. Perhaps we might be able to do it in flies in a few years' time if we understand the genetic components that are behind sleep. Until we do that experiment, I think it's reasonable to assume that sleep has an effect, a beneficial effect, on the whole body. And it's not a crazy assumption if you just trust your own experience, probably, because most people know that a night of sleep deprivation, for instance, yes, we'll have cognitive performance. We might not feel as sharp and as refreshed the day after, but we'll also have performance which are physical, in terms of physical well-being. I personally get cramps, for instance, and my tiredness reflects on my ability to move around and to just be as active as I normally will be. So there is definitely data to suggest that sleep is not a phenomenon that interests the brain itself, but also is something that whole body benefits from. So we can study this. We actually do study this. My laboratory has created in the past few years a system to study sleep in fruit flies in a very specific and unstressful way. The reason we do this is because sleep deprivation experiments by themselves, they can be very stressful. The Spanish Inquisition used sleep deprivation as a way of torture. And so if sleep deprivation is not done properly, then we're not studying sleep deprivation, we're not studying lack of sleep, we're studying stress. And so that's not what we want to do. So we created a system that is based on a robot, basically, that will look at the flies all the time. Experiments can continue for days or weeks sometimes. And we'll know when the flies are awake or asleep. When they are awake, you can also detect what they're doing. Are they interacting? Are they feeding? Are they just behaving properly or not? And one thing we can do, which is quite unique actually, is we can sleep deprive flies. So we can connect this machine to a robot, and the robot will be able to rotate the tube where the fly is located, so that as soon as the fly falls asleep, the tube will spin quickly, about 300 revolutions per minute. This action will last only a fraction of a second, but that's enough to wake the fly up in a non-invasive, non-stressful way. They might feel a bit dizzy, but it's very efficient, and we've used this system extensively to study sleep deprivation. We've studied not just acute sleep deprivation, that the kind of the party-like sleep deprivation that keeps you up all night, but also perhaps the more clinically relevant chronic sleep restriction. That is, we give the animals the chance to sleep only few hours a night. And that mimics the condition which many of us find themselves because of work, because of school. We don't always get as much sleep as we like to. And so this chronic sleep restriction we know has, from clinical studies, we know will have effects on just the well-being of the person, of course on the cognitive performance, but also on the physical well-being. And that ranges from a condition associated to various types of disease, but also the ability to just be as physically active as you will normally be when you're rested. So we can study that in flies. We can study that in different ways. We can study how they walk, how they fly, of course. We can study whether the muscles, their junctures, whether basically their ability to walk or run away from a predator or find some food, whether that is affected after sleep deprivation. We also studying at the moment, for instance, how sleep deprivation affects their decision-making behavior by putting these flies in a maze and look at how long it takes for them to get out of the maze. This tells us about their decision-making, but also about their ability to navigate a space. We can do something called a clumping assay, where we actually put flies in a tube, we bang the tube on the bench, and then we see how long it takes for the flies to reach the top of the tube again. So it's a bit of a military army exercise, if you wish. There's a good measure of their physical well-being. This is normally used in the context of genetic studies, but we do use it also in the context of sleep deprivation. So I was asked to prepare a one-page document about how our research fits what I understand are your interests in terms of physical well-being. I figured a video would be probably a more efficient way of doing so. I just wanted to let you know that I did work with philanthropic donation in the past. There is in fact at least another gentleman at the moment whose donation is helping the lab. And I do enjoy that aspect, not only because it feels, it makes me feel like my science is more translational and more appreciated. It feels like I'm using the taxpayer money to physically get back to the public. So with these other gentlemen, for instance, what I've done is he came to my lab a couple of times, met the people who work with me. At the moment, there are 6 other people who work with me. And then we discuss projects, we discuss ideas, and also for a recent manuscript that we just submitted for publication, I've run it with him first. I wanted to hear his feedback as a layman feedback about the message of the manuscript, to understand whether it was accessible, whether it was made sense to someone who's not a specialist in the field. And so I will be super happy to do this again with other people interested in being part of the lab. Likewise, if you are interested in come and visit us, it'll be a pleasure to show you around. I can tell you that what we will do with this money is actually to probably hire a young research assistant. So this is a girl who's been working in the lab for the past 3 months, and it will be good to have some money to actually have them continue on this project. So she was working on for the next probably year or so. Then we will be able to discuss the progress and talk about the science behind it, and have a real-time update on how things are going. Again, any question, I'll be happy to address it. For now, I won't steal any more of your time. Thanks.